Brethren, before I begin, I would like to inform you that you just participated in a musical piece. The selection I chose for you is the first movement of 433 by John Cage. It's a three-movement composition. It was designed to inspire the listener to either hear complete silence or simply consist of the ambient noise the listeners hear during the performance. And you did, didn't you? You heard some coughing. You heard some crinkling of some candy wrappers. You heard the fan overhead. Because the performer does not participate in this piece, the composer could not control whatever noise may happen during the performance, thus leaving it to the audience to experience something unique. Any sound could be music to Cage, a reflection of the Buddhism he studied in his life. I thought this might be a good way to start today's conversation. Music, from the Greek musika, literally meaning the art of the muses. The purpose of today's discussion is to highlight the importance of music to Freemasonry. So what is music? While the Oxford Dictionary defines music as vocal or instrumental sounds or both, combined in such a way as to produce beauty of form, harmony, and expression of emotion. If you'll pardon a bit of indiscretion, I turned to Wikipedia because I can honestly say that one of the most profound statements in the entirety of the entire website is this: music is an art form whose medium is sound and silence. That's pretty profound for Wikipedia. You're going to see some definitions here as to what music is from musicians and scholars. Elliot Schwartz said it is the organization of sound and time. Beethoven said, music is the one incorporeal entrance into the higher world of knowledge which comprehends mankind, but which mankind cannot comprehend. Arthur Honegger called music geometry and time. The Scottish philosopher Thomas Carlyle said, music may well be said to be the speech of angels. I am particularly fond of the following by Arthur Schopenhauer. Music is the occult, metaphysical exercise of a soul not knowing that it philosophizes. So, we know what music is, but where did it come from? Well, we're taught of our well-learned brother Pythagoras, who is said to have discovered many secrets regarding the world, among which is music. But what did he actually discover? Let's take a look at it. Well, if you take a piece of string, make it taut, and pluck it, you have a note. Take that piece of string, divide it in half again, make tight, and pluck, and it's the same tone, but one octave higher. This discovery led to the musical scale we actually use today. For the record, Pythagoras was born some 2,500 years ago and remains an important figure to the schools of mystery and in our current discussion today. So Pythagoras may have discovered musical scales and notes, but he couldn't have discovered music at all, mostly because of these. First, a flute from the Hohlefels cave in the Swabian Alps of Germany, made from the hollow bone of a vulture's wing. It was perforated with 5-finger holes and produces a beautiful tone. The second is a flute from the Geisenkersler cave in southern Germany and is made of mammoth ivory. Now, what's interesting about these two flutes is that they are 35,000 and 42,000 years old, respectively, making them the oldest instruments in existence that we found. This is interesting for a variety of reasons, namely that they predate our learned brother Pythagoras by 33 and 40 millennia, but it shows that music has existed as long as we can trace. What's especially interesting as well is that these flutes were undoubtedly played by humans at a time when what we call modern language was really coming to fully develop. That is to say, less than 100,000 years ago. This is where science comes in and things really start to get interesting. So music is a universal yet human trait. Compared to sounds of nature such as birdsong, which is purely biological, the instruments from prehistory show that ours is a musical species, and it's why it makes sense that music affects our brains the way it does. Why is this? Well, if our brains developed in such a way that music and speech came together, or that music was an inherent aspect in the formation and the higher functions of our brains, that would explain a great deal. But this is really just scratching the surface, because studies have actually shown that music can chemically alter our body by releasing dopamine in the striatum of the brain. The only other things that do this naturally are food and sex. Drugs can also do this, but those aren't necessarily natural. So music can cause the release of a chemical in the brain that makes you truly feel, and not just feel, but feel in the same category of an exquisite meal or being engaged in copulation. This is different from seeing. Watching something sad unravel before you may make you sad and even cause tears, but that is a question of the hierarchical functions of the brain in the cerebral cortex producing a response to the visual stimuli or triggering of a memory, as opposed to the chemical reaction which causes the sheer feeling that can come from music. In this sense of feeling, music is also intimate. Daniel Bernard Roumain, who's a young cross-genre violinist, thinks one reason music is so powerful is that sound actually penetrates our bodies. He says, "You know, when someone says that a piece of music touched me or moved me, it's very literal. The sound of my voice enters your ear canal and it is moving your eardrum. That's a very intimate act. I am very literally touching you, and when you speak to me, you are literally touching me." And then we extend that principle to the sound of a violin. From a philosophical standpoint, this certainly melds with what Plato had to offer. Rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward places of the soul. As a quick aside, I present you my son, Henry. Here he's listening intently to a violin performance at Brother Ryan Flynn's installation in January. Brother Ryan Flynn, by the way, is up on the 3rd floor selling art, so feel free to stop by and buy some. So Henry and I listen to classical music every day in the car if I'm dropping him off or picking him up at daycare. Unless Mom's in the car and we're listening to Disney. But the music that we listen to elicits feeling within his brain. It aids in his development. It's why doctors don't joke when they suggest playing music while the baby is in the womb, because it does get back to that natural development of music in our brains over the past 40 millennia. So let's go back to Plato's quote for a second. Rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward places of the soul. Harmony is an interesting word. So Oxford defines harmony in the Mass noun as the combination of simultaneously sounded musical notes to produce a pleasing effect. So, harmony. In the count noun as the quality of forming a pleasing and consistent whole or the state of being in agreement or concord. So here we have a word with two very important and similar meanings. Harmony being the beauteous noise that comes in music, and is also in a very familiar verse for many of us, being the strength and support of all institutions, more particularly this of ours. Is it any wonder then that our ancient brother Pythagoras came to view a mathematical proportion of the movement of the celestial bodies and believed there was music in it? As Socrates said to Glaucon, "For I conceive that as the eyes are designed to look up at the stars, so are the ears to hear harmonious motions, and these are sister sciences, as the Pythagoreans say." So here we have a direct link to astronomy and music. The eye sees and the ear hears the glorious proportion of movement in the heavens, a metaphysical concept we call the harmony of the spheres. Now, the golden ratio. It appears in musical arrangements and in tone itself. If you actually want to hear a variation of the golden ratio, a simple YouTube search will produce results for you. But let me return to the octaves I mentioned earlier. If you divide an octave by a perfect fifth, you get the golden ratio. And if you divide a perfect fifth, you will always get the golden ratio. So I'd like to return for a moment to where we began this afternoon with 433 with respect to harmony. So imagine you're sitting in a concert hall while there is no sound emanating from the orchestra or an individual pianist sitting up on the stage, but you're surrounded by people in the hall. You're hearing a noise, you're hearing coughs or sounds from the outside, or perhaps the ticking of a pocket watch. But where are you physically? You're with people. You are in harmony with those people as you are experiencing an emotional response with them. So the last word to offer on harmony is the musical term harmonic. Now, a harmonic wave is a component of frequency. It's a musical note composed of many harmonically related frequencies is perceived as one sound, the quality or timbre of that sound being a result of the relative strengths of the individual harmonic frequencies. The best example of this is on string instruments. When a finger touches the string and it produces a vibration, which leads to a harmonic mode, seen here. The variance of the sound wave depends on the note. So just take a quick peek at that visual a moment though. What stands out to you? Perhaps it's this, the Vesica Pisces. The basis of the Hermetic maxim of as above, so below. The root of sacred geometry and part of many other sacred mysteries. So now we have a connection between biology, astronomy, music. Perhaps we ought to look a little deeper. Let us return to that definition before offered by the composer Honegger. Music is geometry and time. Well, how? Well, you can think of music just like time. The clock is a circle divided evenly into 12 hours. An octave of music is divided evenly into 12 semitones. Therefore, if you assign the 12 semitones of an octave of music to the 12 numbers on the clock and draw a line from each number to each other number, you have what is called a harmonosphere. The clock measures time clockwise forward and counterclockwise backward. The harmonosphere measures musical intervals clockwise up in pitch and counterclockwise down in pitch. The lines on the harmonosphere each measure the harmony and the interval between the two notes that it joins. So if we take a moment and we examine a piano's notes and a mirror for each, for example, the key in the middle of the notes C and E, we find a proportional symmetry which, when laid on top of this harmonosphere, with the numbers substituted with keys, you find that symmetry making more geometrical sense in a musical way. But let us remember Plato's earlier suggestion about the soul when we consider this. The 17th century German philosopher and mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz said, "Music is a hidden arithmetic exercise of the soul which does not know that it is dealing with numbers because it does many things by way of unnoticed conceptions which with clear conception it could not do. Those who believe that nothing can happen in the soul of which the soul is not conscious are wrong. For this reason, the soul, although not realizing that it is involved in mathematical computation, still senses the effect of this unnoticeable forming of numbers, either as a resultant feeling of well-being in the case of harmonies, or as discomfort in the case of disharmonies." So we've talked a bit about music and astronomy in the case of the harmony of the spheres. We talked about music and biology in the sense that music affects us chemically. And we have talked about music in terms of geometry with respect to mathematics in general and the more spiritual, sacred sense. And so we arrive at Freemasonry. Let us begin with the written connections. In 1390, with the Hallowell manuscript, we see, through high grace of Christ in heaven, he commenced in the sciences 7. Music is the 4th, and music is a sweet song. In 1450's Cook manuscript, the 6th is music, and that teaches the art of singing by notation for the voice on the organ, trumpet, and harp, and of all things pertaining thereto. And his brother Jubal or Tubal was the inventor of music and song, as Pythagoras states in Polychronicon, and the same says Isidorus. In Anderson's 1723 constitutions, we find songs of the master, wardens, fellowcrafts, and entered apprentices, which were not simply drinking songs, but histories, and important lessons were contained therein. In 1760's expose, 3 distinct knocks, we see the lesson question and answer, and a song of history, to be sung to the candidate after he had been entered. Arriving in time to my Masonic hero, William Preston, in 1772's Illustration of Masonry, whereby we are taught, music teaches the art of forming concords so as to compose delightful harmony by a proportional arrangement of acute, grave, and mixed sounds. This art, by a series of experiments, is reduced to a science with respect to tones and the intervals of sound only. It inquires into the nature of concords and discords and enables us to find out the proportion between them by numbers, which reinforces our discussion thus far on harmonies and the connection between science, music, and numbers. Preston also informs us that hearing is that sense by which we distinguish sounds and are capable of enjoying all the agreeable charms of music in hearing as one of the 3 essential senses of the Freemason, which lends credence to the previous discussion regarding sound permeating our eardrums and the future discovery that music produces a mood-changing effect on the listener. Now, I will state in my mind that practicing tradition in Freemasonry means traditional music. The 20th century, for as modern and forward-thinking as it was, produced some music that can simply be described as ear-shattering. Despite our opening experience, I would never consider atonal or experimental music in a lodge with respect for tradition. In a lodge where one listens to music carefully, there shouldn't be ambient noise. There should be meditation or reflection on the piece before you to help you feel. Indeed, as Brother Andrew Hammer stated in his musical essay, it is important for the lodge master to be as involved in the meditation or reflection as it is for any brother on the sideline. And that's why there should always be an accompanying time for us to reflect on any piece after the musical selection is over. Now, before I lose interest with some of you, I will state that tradition is long. It is not short. And while there is modern music that is traditional in nature that fits our purposes, modern music, Katy Perry, does not. In observant Masonry, we all strive to honor the heritage of our Masonic forebears. We respect not only the work they did in the quarries, but also the legacies that they left. Music in its place in lodge is one such legacy that should be honored. I do not suggest a lodge must have a soloist who can sing all the songs appearing in Anderson's constitutions. But if we are to truly thrive in a contemplative fashion, proper homage should be paid to the various arts and sciences we are instructed to practice in our fellowcraft degree, music being one of the 2 that is both art and science. If our goal, and I refer to all of us here in this room, if our goal is to restore our true Masonic edifices, that is to say, the things that make Freemasonry truly Freemasonry, then observing the solemnities of music within the walls of the lodge should be a part of every Masonic meeting. Not because you need to, but because you want to make Freemasonry all the more meaningful to you and the members of your lodge. My friends, we have taken a journey this afternoon in the discussion of music. This journey, I contend, is a fairly important one. There is legitimate Masonic evidence of serious and contemplative music in lodges throughout the fraternity's history. There have been numerous compositions written exclusively for our lodges over the past few hundred years, as well as music composed as inspiration from the lodges. Music that may be as deep as the Mariana, nor as shallow as a puddle. But it is all written with one common purpose, to make the listener feel. Music is an agreeable harmony for the honor of God and the permissible delights of the soul. Brethren, in conclusion, I would like to introduce to you Thomas Tallis, a 16th century English composer. He played to Kings Henry VIII and Edward VI and Queens Mary and Elizabeth. And for the last 10 years of his life had a patent from Elizabeth to print any music in any language. A remarkable composer known as one of England's best. At the age of 65, he composed Spem in Alium, Latin for hope in any other. It is a 40-piece motet, that is to say 8 choirs of 5 voices each. It is designed to be sung in a horseshoe, where the audience is sitting in the middle, and the music permeates around them. It begins with a single voice from the first choir. Other voices join in imitation, each in turn falling silent as the music moves around the 8 choirs. All 40 voices enter simultaneously for a few bars, and then the pattern of the opening is reversed, with the music passing from choir 8 to choir 1. There's another brief full section, after which the choirs sing in antiphonal pairs, throwing the sound across the space between them. Finally, all voices join for the culmination of the work. I'm going to play that piece for you now, and I hope you enjoy it, which, by the way, in 2012, being 442 years old, was at the top of the UK classical charts. Please enjoy this piece.